Welcome to the very first episode of the Principles of Impact podcast. On the show, my co-host Devin and I are diving deep into conversations with entrepreneurs, creators, and community and nonprofit leaders to uncover the guiding ideas, beliefs, and rules leaders follow to create impact in today's world. With Principles of Impact, we're tapping into the mind and perspectives of leaders to uncover the unique principles you can adopt in your own life to build a foundation for greater personal and organizational impact. And of course, to have incredible conversations and a lot of fun doing it. In today's episode, we sit down with Joseph Antoine Alston, acute functional movement specialist and owner of the Alston Center, a hub for health and healing in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and creator of the Alston Method, to discuss movement as medicine, unlocking your body's healing potential with the Alston Method. Joseph has spent over 30 years teaching individuals how to deal with physical challenges and setbacks while achieving fitness and wellness goals. His unique understanding of fitness, the body's ability to distribute oxygen through all extremities while under stress or load, sets him apart from conventional fitness facilities and traditional trainers. Clients and medical fitness peers alike view him as a gifted and intuitive healer based on his track record of consistently achieving uncommon results for and with his clients.
I got to tell you that I've been at this business a long time. I've seen a lot of therapists and a lot of people that have helped people, get from point A to point A in rehab and after injuries, and, athletes trying to get, their strength and mobility back. And Antoine is the most intuitive healer I think I've ever met. With his method, he's got sound basic principles about balance and strength. But Antoine is the kind of guy that can, just by simply watching somebody, he could tell whether my hamstrings were way out of balance in comparison to my quads. Most people have to get on a sophisticated testing machine, or they're just not intuitive, or they just don't spend enough time to really focus. And I worked with some really good therapists, over the years. And there was 2 or 3 that I would always send everybody to because they were my gurus for really getting somebody well. Antoine, he can pick up almost anything that's out of balance and figure out ways to get you back in balance. I think for somebody to heal, they need to not be in a place of fear. And Antoine not only is intuitive, but he's compassionate. And that's a big, important part of how somebody gets well. If you can take somebody out of a place of fear and you can connect with whoever's trying to help you and trust them, that puts you way ahead of the game.
Joseph has trained and treated well-known celebrities, including artists Kenny Aronoff, Emmanuel Axe, Benjamin Luxon, actors Danny Glover, Woody Harrelson, Linus Roach, Michelle Gill, Kristen Johnson, and Dr. Mark Hyman. His current venture, the Alston Center, a hub for health and fitness, is a destination for individuals seeking to heal the body through movement. His signature method, designed around a series of 8 essential movements, identifies an individual's asymmetries while simultaneously building strength and mobility. The end result, dynamic integration of the entire body, which allows the individual to move through their day with ease, function, and vitality. During this interview with us, Joseph shares his journey and his insights, illuminating how you can tap into your body's innate ability to heal and thrive by getting in touch with your body through your intuition and returning to simple, essential movements that are accessible to all. Now let's dive into the conversation with Joseph Antoine Alston. Welcome, my friend, to the Principles of Impact podcast. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely, it's exciting. So tell me a little bit about how you got into this method, because this is a really fascinating story, I feel like, and we would just love to hear kind of how you came to this methodology, and in your words up front, what would be your description of the method?
Okay. How I came to it and the description, which one would you like first?
I guess the description, just to explain, we got some of PJ's context, but would love to hear it in your words.
Yeah, and this conversation will ebb and flow back and forth because I'm a pretty dynamic individual and things, I think of a figure 8, basically. I think I'm constantly looking back, but also then being present and then also looking ahead. And that is kind of where the Alston Method came out of. But it's really a culmination of my past, my present, and some foresight. along with a ton of experience of being a high-level athlete, working with a ton of different individuals from all walks of life. I like to say, Devin and PJ, that I've worked with the bottom 2% or 1%. When I say bottom, I'm not classifying anybody as less than, but just meaning individuals that were maybe couldn't move at all, individuals that were poverty struck, So then all the way up to the top athletes that are looking to slam dunk a ball or score a touchdown. So I took a method and I looked at what connects us, what combines us, and I would be misinterpreting or lying to say that it didn't have something also to do with having 7 children, because really the way my brain works is it's borrowing all the time from yesterday, today, and then tomorrow. And I look at the fact that when you look at all these movements that people want to be vital when they come out of the belly, from in utero, it's typically they're being on their backs and then they roll and everyone's so excited. The baby rolled and they lift their head and they get to all fours and then they kneel and then they crawl some more and eventually they're on 2 knees and then eventually they're up walking and then they're jumping and then they're running, whatever it is. But I looked at those and I said, wow, okay, that's pretty primal and basic. We need those. We come and we are born. Some people say we're born to run. I say we're actually born to walk. I think technically we should be able to run if things are functioning well. Then you go a little further up the spectrum and you look at the people that are your high level performers. They needed the same movements that I needed to become a vital human being, just to walk around. So you're taking what a baby would do at one level, which we all would love to do again. And some of us are born in positions that we can't walk, unfortunately. But the bottom line is we go through these primal movement patterns, all of us. If we're human, we go through these particular patterns. And then I look at the highest level of the function. I go, wait, they're using the same patterns, except for they have now fine-tuned them, added a little load on them, added some speed to them, some different velocities, some different ranges of motion. But they're still, in essence, we are the same. And being in the fitness industry for over 30 years, I've watched a lot of people get left behind based on trying to get to places that they, 1, didn't know how to access, 2, were not ready to access. It might be coming into a gym and trying to go into a Tabata class or a kettlebell class or spin class, whatever it was they were getting into. Often what that was they were a little bit ahead of where they should have been, or either that their joints weren't even accustomed to what they were about to do. And the longer period of time, I watched it all. Again, I came back to the common denominator that there's really only 8 foundational movements or 8 essential movements. And how you get to and from them is what makes a distinction. But we're all comprised of a head, 2 shoulders, 2 hips, 2 knees, 2 ankles. God, promote, hoping that's the case,
Right.
And those are where I'm playing off those 8 foundational movements. And I wanted to have something that was very accessible, very functional, very necessity-based, but also something I could tie into walking well, standing well, jumping well, sitting well, no pain, circulation, oxygen patterns. So it really came from, again, years and years of observing a lot of people and taking the lowest common denominator that we all have, which is these 8 foundational movements.
That's awesome.
Now, as far as getting into it, I really, for me, without getting too long of a backstory, I moved up to the Berkshires. I was probably 7, 8 years old or something like that. And, when you moved to the Berkshires in the late, I want to say it was the late 70s, early 80s, something around there. It was a predominantly white area. It still is a predominantly white area, but it wasn't the most welcoming area. So what got me through was my physical capacity, my physical prowess, my ability to one, endure some things that I didn't want to endure, to be able to get in a situation, to get out of a situation, to be able to excel and to be an outlier, not in the way that they had me be the outlier, which was in essence the external side of my body, which is my skin color. But how about the fact that this guy is like, I want him on my team. He's a great athlete. He's an attribute to the community. He is now able to help us win a gold, whatever it was, but I needed to use that. And some of it also came out of the fact that I had to do it for self-defense. So my body was my best friend. And it was me and my body that had to figure this one out. So I've been very intimate and a more innate way possibly than one maybe should have had to but I'm excited that I had that journey and don't regret any of it.
That's a powerful place to be. And I think that anytime you can take kind of your own journey and craft it into a way that is so much more unique, the way that you've come to it is not the traditional path that a healer may go. Maybe they go to school for chiropractic, or they go to become a doctor or something like that. You came at healing from a different angle. So why is healing important to what message that you're bringing, like from that place?
I love that. Healing is a process that is sometimes overstated and then sometimes underrated. And I say healing is happening every day and every night. So in fitness periodization scales and conversations, you have a stress phase, and then you have a rest phase, and you have a recovery phase. And the recovery phase, we could call it a healing phase, you know? So it's really in every part of life and nature, which is why I also like to think of my system as very decentralized, is actually what it is, because you're always hopefully healing and repairing. And unfortunately, it's looked upon when you're down and out and you're injured or you're completely depressed. But if we can keep up with the healing cycle as a part of the natural cycle that we all should have naturally and daily and regularly, it just should be one of those languages that's just there. It's there because the body hopefully is always repairing and healing. And I would also say that coming from the fact that at one point being a mixed martial artist and being injured, I realized there is some very important times which you needed to heal to perform again. As a good running back, for instance, I knew that the games were often on Fridays or Saturdays, but Monday through Thursday, often I felt like I wasn't completely healed yet to get back on the field. So I'm really looking at all of it. I look at sometimes the healing for a person from a mom. You know, my daughter-in-law just gave birth to my first, I guess I could say it's my grandchild. Wow, at 51, it is my grandchild. But to see her heal from something beyond sports specificity called giving birth. Like, so the healing aspect is so a part of life. And I wanted to get my hand around it, my head around it, and make it accessible to people and take away the complexities from it, which is really what the methodology that I created did. And I have to also say that I'm a scientist. I'm a scientist because if it doesn't work, I throw it out. I've had 30 years of doing this, but I've also owned and operated large gyms and employed physical therapists and worked with MDs and orthopedic surgeons and physiatrists and nutritionists and dietitians. So from yoga to Feldenkrais or Gosku, I've looked at every part that most people could ever imagine or dream about within the field of movement, of stress, rest, and recovery. And that's also where this method came from. It came from a lot of observation and a lot of feedback. You know, one of the biggest things I think where we go wrong is communication, but yet not having someone come back with information. And when you stay in the same field as I have for so long and work with people from, for instance, one of my favorites who passed away not too long ago was Rabbi Everett Gimler. To have the ability to work with a man, not only who was as brilliant as he is and was, but from 73 to 94, that's 21 years of observation of working with one body. Being in the same community, doing the same thing for the same period of time, working with some of the same people, that's when you really understand what life is and stress is and rest is and recovery is, and how different stresses actually come from walking to thinking to what you watch to when you go to bed. So this method is so rich, and it's really the people's method.
That's a great term.
Yeah, love the people's method. Can you take us through, so again, we're sitting here today where your method at this point has been, recognized as an alternative healing approach, as a very effective approach, as a very accessible kind of universal approach that anybody that can move a bit and get in and out of a chair, and even in some cases, maybe even more limited than that, can benefit from what you're doing, from the Alston method specifically. Can you walk us through how this method came about in terms of going back to your roots, you were focused on functional movement and physical performance, as I understand it. And please correct me when you take the mic in a moment. And over that journey, and as you said, observing a body for 20 years, right? Observing both the arc of some of our retirees and elderly as they age, as well as the newborns, the newcomers into the world, and what you saw in their movement and how they function and live. Can you kind of just take us through how did this go from I'm this really badass physical, like fitness functional movement trainer to I actually have a unique take and method that's a little different than the fitness guys and a little different than the medical industry that's vital, especially in today's world?
Yeah, boy, that's deep. That's deep. And one of the things I have to work on is being concise because of the way my brain moves around. So help me out if I start to go off on a tangent.
We're in it
But
together.
yeah, thanks. That really comes. The first thing that came to mind was actually when I was 40 years old, probably 35 is when it started. I was a high level. I was still competing in mixed martial arts, doing some jujitsu Naga tournaments, and I realized that often, every time I went down to the mat, I would get dizzy. I realized that why is it that I look like damn near Arnold Schwarzenegger, but my breathing was off, or that I still had some pains, or inflammation was high, or I had reflux. So I was starting to undergo breakdowns by like around 35, 36, 37, but it didn't match up to conventional standards, because according to convention, the way I looked and the way I moved would say I was well, but yet my medical readings, what I felt like, my ability to sleep, my ability to keep a calm, level head, my ability to not be dizzy, my ability to not have reflux, my ability to not be a little bit depressed or anxious, for a guy who again looked great and moved great, what the hell was going wrong? So, I started questioning me and the system, because I lived the system. I was the guy bench pressing 400 pounds. I was the guy running a 4.540. I was that guy, but yeah, I was a guy who was off 100%. So I'm also smart enough to know the pathway I was on was starting to fail me, and it was crashing, but it didn't make sense according to the exercise science degree. It didn't make sense according to my performance outcomes and measurements, but I felt it and I could see it. So that was probably what made me really, really dig deep. And if I fast forwarded, at about 40 years old, going through a pretty tough time, I literally lost my body. There's the truth. I lost it, and all of a sudden realized that my speech was off a little bit. My energy was way off. I was hospitalized briefly. And this is where someone like a Wim Hof, this is someone where like a Joe Dispenza, a Dr. Jack Cruz, these were where you have your aha moments. And my aha moment was a leg extension wasn't going to get me back up on my back and balanced. It wasn't going to get my reflux to go away. A squat press wasn't, a dumbbell curl, a sprint wasn't. It was something innate. It was something intrinsically wired in me that was speaking to me. And it was like, okay, you cannot jump, you can't run, you can barely breathe well, and you're not even able to drive right now. So what's going on? So I would lie down and I would feel. And truly, from the inside out, the movement started to come back to me. And it went from laying on my back to then all of a sudden feeling not great laying on my side. And why? And how much time would I lay on my side, which would create a place of stability, but yet maybe a place you didn't want to be too long. So I called it a transitional position, a side. I thought, okay, wow. So it starts to file it. Now, this is all coming off of, at one point, playing on the high level. But once you fall down and have to get back up, you have to do it in micro doses. You have to do it in micro stages. And again, I feel like it just happened. And before you know it, I got well. I got off of all the medicines. I got really healthy in my mind, my body, and spirit through these movements that came to me, which really aren't mine. These are our movements. These are the movements that, again, made me look back at in utero patterns. It made me look back into nature and watch what's happening. And I said, obviously, I went too far, too fast, too long on the other side of the track. So I said, okay, I believe it. I played it. So some people don't stick with something long enough to know what the truth is, which means, have they truly hypothesized? Did they really do their lab work? Well, I did my lab work, and that side of the fence failed me. And not only did it fail me, I started to look into the fitness industry and the movement industry and see that all the big guys and big gals and big people bulked up were also injured and getting surgeries, and tempers were off and depressed, and suicide rates were high and the reflux was up. Their mitochondrial loads were off. I said, wait a second, I'm right. And I got saved. Somehow I got saved. I got spared. Something happened to me and allowed me to get back up and do it again and compare from the way I did it the first time, look at everything that's happening. You know, you also look at some of the blue zone areas. You look ahead, you look at people that have aged well, and they weren't sprinting, and they were eating well, and they were spending time out in nature, and they had good relationships and good communication with people. So I started going, wait a second, man, like there is a way to put this all back together. And that's really the deepest way that it came to me, was by it being knocked down. You know, I was doing a presentation one time, and I had a friend say, do you know that it's a Chinese proverb and it says fall down 7 times, get up 8? And I said, no, I didn't know. And that's another thing I think that has allowed me to I'm empathetic. I feel, and I also listen. So I learn every day from from people all the time. Yeah.
So I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That was, there were things, you know, we go back now, 5 years, I think, roughly. And there was things in there that I didn't know about your story and this whole process. So you make the shift. You do kind of the research and the lab work. You understand that, okay, there's a narrative over here about fitness and wellness, but when you apply those principles, right, those ideas, you don't actually get longevity. You might be able to run that 4.5, 4.4, or push that 400, but you're not getting the long-term vitality that most people are interested in. And so how did your internal shift start to influence your clientele and get them elevated results? Because that's like the second part that you kind of gave me the first part of the question, and I'm just interested to get that second piece of, like, Joseph Antoine Alston has a new perspective and new insight, and he's leveled up. And then how was that able to be transferred to
Well, this is beautiful,
clients and
PJ.
patients?
This is beautiful. This is going to give people a deep inside look into who I am. I actually was in what I call compensatory patterns. I treated me differently than I treated my clients, always. I always met my client a little more sympathetically and empathetically and tried to understand where they were coming from. Me, I just bulled through everything because that was life to me. So I actually had probably 20 years of great experience of success with clients before I fell down. I was not practicing what I was preaching. There's reality. Like, I was treating clients when they came in, before I had them do what I would do, I had them walk. I had them talk to me. I understood, because I cared more. Again, I think I cared more about others than I did myself. I always wanted to know where they were coming from, why they were there with me, what made them choose me over the last person, what failed them. So I was constantly taking data from other people and applying a different Alston method, per se, undefined, to clients pretty much from day one. And again, I think that comes out of people love, not self-love, but people love. So I've always treated clients very differently. I was 23 years old, and I could have been 24. I don't want to misquote anything, but I did a class called Express on Wheels at the only gym in Great Barrington. I tell this story over and over because it's a very important part of who I am. I was working with quadriplegics, paraplegics, and spina bifida clients, and they couldn't do the typical and traditional. So here I was trying to get someone just the ability to be able to take a neck harness off, to have just a little more range of motion and freedom. I'm trying to get a young man with spina bifida out of a wheelchair just to stand up and balance. So really all the things that I learned didn't apply to those people. I had to really care enough to devise different movements and to actually even find out why they were stressed when they got there and what they were eating. So I came from a compensatory pattern of why I was pushing myself that hard, but yet not doing that to others. And I've always been very creative and innovative when it came to other people. But again, what you do and what you say are two different things, and they can be. My congruence came in when I got injured. And I realized I was going too fast and not loving myself as much as I had been loving other people. I've been healing people for a long time, but I actually didn't want to look at it as healing. I just wanted to look at it as this buff, badass trainer. And was actually not looking, honestly, truthfully, at what I was doing, which was healing people. I was putting people back in positions that they could integrate into their lives. They could get up and walk to get water. They could then take a walk with their husband or their wife. They could get off the ground if there was a fire. Those are the things I was working with people on. Things that people couldn't feel their foot. And my goal was, how do I get you to feel your foot? But yet, for me, I wanted to know how high I could jump. Forget feeling my foot. I didn't care if I didn't feel my foot, as long as my foot got me over the hurdle. I've always been that guy. It's always been there, but just not for me. But when it actually affected me is when the marriage came together.
Got it.
And also, it's very interesting. I've always had this feeling in me that, and anybody, I guess, if someone sees this, they'll speak to it if it's not true, which I'm certain it is. But I've always loved helping someone do something they couldn't do. Always. I've always loved helping the underdog. So from day one, my life has been built around, how do I help you get what you can't get? I would like to get what I want as well, but how do I help you get what you can't get? And often in the physical realm. I love that. It's forever.
It seems like there's a real power in the combination of a high performance, like just kind of get it done mechanistic approach and maybe a competitive athlete approach combined with this wounded healer journey as well, and coming at it from a place of compassion, I guess, for
Absolutely.
yourself as well as through I think so much of the journey that a lot of us go through in spaces like this and kind of self-development is realizing how often we treat other people, or that could be your clients, that could be your loved ones, better than we actually treat ourselves. I feel like such growth happens and in that process of kind of either coming through an injury or coming through, could be a Tony Robbins workshop. Who knows how you get there, but
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which he's great, by the way. Tony Robbins. I like Tony Robbins. Yes.
Yeah.
And Devin, some of this is just, it's time. You really, you're blessed if you're around long enough to learn and grow, and hopefully you're growing while you're learning, and vice versa. I have never wanted just to be here. I wanted to be here, grow and learn. And my paradigm has shifted. And that means you have to do a lot of questioning. If you're just going through your day, accepting the mundane or the mass production of whatever is being said to you and not asking why, you're probably going in the wrong direction. My paradigm shifted because I was always very inquisitive and curious. And I saw a lot of lies. I'll tell you, one of the best stories I have, which is, again, all these stories are true, but I was 18 years old. I was getting my first certification, and Dr. Fred Hatfield, the founder and inventor of International Sports and Science Association, which I got my highest level of certification and degree out of. I was 18 years old in Framingham, Massachusetts. I was home on a break from Western Connecticut State University, and I wanted to go get a certification. So I get out there, and long story short, Dr. Fred Hatfield is doing the certification himself at this time. Well, at that time, unlike many other 18-year-olds, I didn't have a license. So when other people left for a break, I couldn't. So I stayed at the hotel during the breaks in the lobby, and Dr. Fred Hatfield was there. And I had the privilege of that intersection of having him start to share with me, as he was the co-editor of Weeder magazine, some of the fallacies that were in there. And I would say, wait a second, you mean Sean Ray's arms are that big and I shouldn't be that big? Or the preacher curl isn't great? He said, well, it's great for hypertrophy if you want to get big muscle, but it's not going to help your posture, and it's not going to help your carotid arteries flow correctly, and it's not going to help you live a super long life, but you're going to look amazing. So I was like, whoa, time out. So, and he also said to me, which I'll never forget, I don't want to misquote this, but I believe he squatted over 1,000 pounds, which seems to me impossible. And I believe they say that's what he did. Again, I'll let that one be. So that being said, he did show me, he said, think about this. Do you think were we born with a bar across our back? Were we born with something that's going to leverage our spine and compress it. Just think about that? So he said, it's not that it's good for you. He said, I'm just so damn good at it. So it was those kind of conversations that had me thinking. I was blessed right out the gate. I came in with a license and certification and questioning my license and certification. I came in with him saying, okay, I want you to understand how you sequence sets and reps, but I don't want to see any of you doing leg extension. I said, well, wait, but that's how I'm going to get that beautiful quad that when I walk down a beach, someone goes, look at those thighs. He said, but when in nature do you ever sit and put your legs out and have something that heavy loading up your ankle or your cruciate ligament? Is it going to create function? So it was those kind of things that this I was blessed with, because he put these little seeds in there that made me question what I did right from the beginning, although I loved it.
That's a great, yeah. It's such a good kind of instant aha. Like it's a little epiphany. Like, when in nature do you do that, and like whether or not. Obviously, looking good is wonderful, and being extremely strong is, admirable in some ways. But going back to function and reconsidering what effect and downstream, or in some other term, like radial consequences of this movement or this pattern, and how that perpetuates throughout the system of the body and the fascia, and how it affects it all, is like such a much deeper understanding in that, like, one or two layers from just the aesthetics of it, or even the function of it in a athletic sense.
Well, it's interesting because I question me as much as I question any journal. And I think those that you trust should be questioning themselves, because I don't know that any of us really know it all, but we keep borrowing and growing throughout the process with feedback. But I did look at my methodology to say, okay, it's one thing that now I don't take the Neurontin, I don't take the gabapentin, I don't take the omeprazole for reflux, I don't need anything for eyes, ear. I feel amazing, I'm nothing. Okay, so fine, I function well, but can I look good? Can I do this and look good in a natural way? Can I move with nature and still be fit? So then I started to look at animals. I said, wait a second, what animal? You look at a tiger, and you go, wait a second. A tiger gets up, possibly roams around sometimes. Most of the time he's chilling, conserving their energy until it's time to go run. They build up all that energy just enough to go run, and they sprint and they sprint, they get their food. But that 1 to 2 outbursts that they have builds a tremendous amount of muscle, and then they eat, they rest and recover. So I said, wait a second, they're gorillas. Everything you look out in nature, they move well, they have a ton of muscle on them. They're not curling, they're not burping, they're not leg pressing, they're not doing these things. It's nature, it's natural. So I thought, will my system allow not only my clients to heal, but once they've healed, because that's the first thing. I want someone to heal first within the method, which is the entry level part of the process. And we can do that. But then can they perform well in these bodies? Can they then can they carry a load? Can they ruck? Can they take this Alston Method system that I've created and then go out and hike a mountain? I have a kid who's a brilliant athlete, and he came home from Stanford University, and he wanted to challenge me a little bit to jiu-jitsu or wrestling match. And I did it. And I thought, oh my God, I haven't done anything really that rigorous. All I do is my 8 foundational movements. Can I be fit? Do I have an anaerobic threshold? Do I have mobility? Do I have stability? Do I have endurance? Well, I did. And I did better than I thought I ever would. And so it was another aha moment that I am drinking what I'm making, and it works well. There's nothing. I just came back from 3 hours of this walking down in Florida, up and down over the motocross. I was working with some guys from motocross, and I'm not training for it, but your body is built to thrive and survive if you love it. And that's what this method does. This method puts you back into alignment and enlightenment in a way that your body does what it's supposed to do. We were born to move. Our bodies are born to heal. Most of us were sold a bad bill of goods in this paradigm of isolation and restriction and hard work and overload. Nah, opposite. I remember, am I well-versed or educated enough to go against Darwin? Yes. Why not? Survival of the fittest. Okay, fine. Fight, flight, freeze. And I remember challenging the fact that there is no freeze. There's no freeze. There's always just, I'm looking for what's called a B moment. And if you believe fight, flight, and freeze, then you're going to then play in that, you know? And I don't believe in that. So I questioned it and I said, wait, what if I don't want to fight? And what if I don't want to fight? How do I just be? How do I just be? Which then took me back to the old tortoise and the hare story. The tortoise won, not the tortoise won. And he did it just by being himself, living over 100 years, walking steady, walking slow, doing what it is that he does, being a turtle. And that's what I think people forgot, which is how to really beat people. And that's what falling down and getting back up taught me, that I was outside of myself. And I've created another term that I'd love to be known for, which is called working in. I think that too many people are working out, but they're already outside of themselves. You work out and you're already outside of yourself. You're fastly heading in the wrong direction, which is separated from self. I think we need to teach people how to come back to their foundational movements. And I think they're going to, lo and behold, be surprised that they have more patience, better circulation, less inflammation, more cognitive function, more balance, more strength than they could have ever imagined. Having 7 children, to watch the brilliance of the twins that I have, how in the hell did they get out of those cribs and do what they did without the muscle? They would do a crawl over and hang and lower themselves down without falling. They didn't do lat pull downs. They were born. They were born. Our bodies have all of these brilliant processes that are built in them. We typically get in the way of the body as opposed to working with the body. And that's what this method is. Again, you can see I'm passionate about it. I talk a lot. I have a lot of information. So I'm going to back up and let you guys ask some more questions again.
Yeah, I appreciate that. One thing I'd like to do for those who come across this episode is I'd like to talk a bit tangibly about some of the symptoms people come to you with, some of the, in some cases, diseases, and in the work you're doing, to reverse dysfunction, to restore health. From there, let's get tangible for a few minutes, because I want people to see and hear, even from outside of our circle right now, what your work, what you're bringing to the table with the Alston Method. And then maybe we could wrap up with diving a bit deeper into some of these principles and some of these kind of key beliefs that you have that are shaping the talent and the healing experience that people are getting.
Yeah, again, to not be redundant, but to say over 100,000 hours of working with human beings of all walks in life is the truth. What just came to mind very quickly was a gentleman, and I'll be respectful and not mention his name, but a very, very high-level individual who was a founder of a major company that we've all partaken his product, I'm certain, came to me after having a major stroke, and came in with his wife, a nurse, and an assistant. And I was hired I owned my club. It was called Berkshire Functional Fitness. And they said, we're asking, could you help this gentleman walk again correctly? Not shuffle, not fall. We love him, and we heard that you got some unique methods and maybe be able to help him. So I typically meet with someone. I listen to the family. I listen to where they sleep, what they watch, what they draw, how they draw, what they used to like to do. I get a history, a real deep history on the individual, first and foremost. And then at the end of it, with that symptom of the stroke, this is post-stroke now, can you get him to walk? I said, not only do I believe I can get him to walk, but I think I can get him to talk. And that was a bold statement. But in my mind, I looked at and listened to the way the individual, and I'm going to try to do somewhat of not a mimic, but a kind of a recapping of what he did. And he was going, and I knew he wanted to talk. So to me, I saw that as a gear in his jaw that just wasn't connecting. It wasn't that and I could see the frustration, which meant I knew the brain was firing, but there was something that wasn't interconnecting up here. Well, that was obvious to me, but also the shuffle and someone holding him told me that something wasn't interconnecting in his hip and his glute and his torso. So I said to them, when I get him to walk, I'll also get him to talk, because I believe there's a deep interconnection with the hip joint and the jaw. Well, 30 days, I told him I need 90 days, but I'll say 30 days into the process, he came back in and he said, I was then making a statement about how well he was walking. And I then said this gentleman's name, and he then opened with loud, clear, positive, strong voice and said, you said it wrong. It's like this. Well, at that point, not only was I so happy to be corrected because I didn't mind, thank you for having a voice, but I was corrected and I was also correct that I could get him to talk. I had a young man with spina bifida, and that's when you're basically born with some form of a division. Usually, I would say in the lower aspect of your spinal canal, somewhere in the lumbar or the sacral area, at the S or L area. And I remember looking at this guy, and I look at everybody as an individual. I look at everybody as just as important as the next person. You are my pro when you come into me. And the task was to get him to be able to walk, to get out of the wheelchair, and to walk, when he did walk, without braces. So I thought, this is going to be fun. And what I actually had to do was I had to reconstruct his body. He was a big upper body individual because when you have spina bifida, unfortunately, conventional settings will probably keep you getting stronger in what you have. I don't want to do that. I want to get you stronger in what you don't have. So my goal was to look at health as an arrangement. To me, health is an arrangement of space, shapes, and movement. So I looked at the structure of his body and I said, your overmassed upper body is what's actually keeping you from walking. That, in conventional standings, you'd say you're going to take away his strength to get him function? Absolutely, because your legs are primal movers. They are there to stabilize you. But if your upper body is too wide and vast outside of this lower extremity and pulling on that spine that's already unstable, I have to narrow you here and then get your legs to work. So it's kind of like what Dr. Jack Kruse says. If you have too much muscle mass in the wrong area because there's a certain relationship to the body has a brilliant relationship already set up. You have to just learn it and follow it. When I deconstructed the upper body, it allowed more circulation and blood flow to the lower body. Inevitably, did I ever get a reading of his spine? I can't say we did that, but I can tell you that we hiked Monument Mountain without canes, without braces, and he fell twice. I mean, and the falls were the falls that anybody would have climbing a slippery mountain. But that was without any assistance. The two of us walked that mountain. But the stories go on and on and on. And I had a gentleman who was a professor from Cornell, and he came and wanted to walk and told me that he'd fallen downstairs and he had broken his back, but actually his back is healed, but he'd just stayed in the wheelchair for 5 years. And I said, so you're going to and from Florida being trained in a wheelchair. I said, your first training session is going to be sitting on the edge of your wheelchair. Because when an individual is sitting back in their wheelchair, their body has no ability to secure itself. It doesn't need to. It's being held by the foundation or the structure of the wheelchair. So as soon as I brought him to the front of the wheelchair, his body started to tremble. So I'm looking at every little aspect from that to a child that had, I believe it was a major inflammatory disease. And I was trying to think what they called it exactly, which we have it in the data in the files. But even working with that child, I had to figure out what was causing her thoracic spine to be under flexion, which basically caused her a lot of external breakouts, a lot of extra fevers, hair loss, swelling in her body. But it goes on and on and on. The body is brilliant. My job is to do is look at the body, whatever it is that you're coming with, and figure out how to get that neuropathy to go away, the circulation. Why is it the tingling? Why isn't that you're not getting the firing at the toes? Why? Why not? Is it because you fell? Is it because it's just that you're eating the wrong thing and your gait is off? But I look at all these bodies as the same in a certain way. And the stories go and go and go, from heart stuff we've done to lungs to rib to liver. Yes, again, sorry to run on and on, but again, 30 plus years in it, you just have so many things filed in here that I just want to give to people.
Yeah, I appreciate those are some real tangible examples and really unique cases, and cases I think what I liked as well is, because I know your work a bit more than and some other folks might, cases where the results you got were not even expected, and whether you went to other medical professionals or other alternative approaches, you're getting a result beyond the expectation. So I think those are great. Devin, do you have any thoughts? Because it's a little bit more fresh for you. I don't know if fresh, but just love to hear your response to those stories.
Yeah, I agree that it's such interesting kind of mix that you would probably learn quite a lot from every individual encounter as well. So it probably builds on itself and kind of revealing the power of what this method can do and why, like understanding the why it works and how it can transfer from one type of disease, as you may term it, to something that's completely different, like from a stroke to spina bifida to someone in a wheelchair. I know just from my own perspective in my own life, my mom is in a wheelchair, and it's definitely something that I would love to get her down there to see. Her and I were in a bad car accident when I was 12 years old, and she had over 100 fractures, and I broke 16 bones. So it was quite a traumatic event, and she still suffers in a lot of ways from that. She's had 25, maybe 30 surgeries at this point. She was in an ICU for maybe 4 months, I think, and then
Wow.
in a long-term care center for like 18. So it was a really long road, in some ways, still on it, but things like that, and watching her learn from kind of her own limitations in how the body, because she was an athlete, still is in some ways, and how she's had to learn to adapt to movement within her limited capabilities. But something like this even gives more hope, I think, in certain circumstances, that more functionality. And I think one of the things that reminds me specifically of her story and some of the things that you were talking about here is how much more is possible than the general system of Western medicine can understand, and how farther she's gone. I mean, she is in many ways, and we could go on to do a whole podcast on kind of her own medical journey, but far exceeded the expected outcomes that doctors gave her. And that is true from like the beginning of where they thought she would be, a year into this, and even 5 years ago. And she continues to still get better and more strong in some ways, and like the parts of her body that she's still able to move are, I mean, she has no shoulder socket, yet she's still able to move her arm. She has one of her legs is there was 3 inches removed off the bone, and they were able to regrow the bone using magnetic stimulation and surgery, and like she's able to use it quite effectively. So it's like really amazing, like things that can be done. And I think exploring how movement can be constrained by physical injury, but can still be expressed in these kind of 8 primal patterns, or not primal patterns. It's probably, don't want to use primal, because a primal movement is kind of its own set of things. And I know you probably have, some differences between their.
I mean, I guess I don't want to interrupt you, but I
Yeah.
do believe that these were actually primal, to be honest with you, Devin. And I also believe that words also create disease and dissection. So from what I believe you're saying primal, what I think of primal is, I think that I was born with these, so they're innate, they're primal, but I think sometimes that thought process can separate us, which is, speaking back to like, when you think of the medical community that we work in. So that's another beautiful thing. I get to work side by side, sometimes literally side by side with the doctors and physicians. So I'm having this Eastern, Western, human conversation with them, which makes it whole. So a lot of my learning has been with the top pros. So there's some brilliant things that the allopathic system brings to us. And I love that. And we also have to give that system a break to one, think of the origin of it, when it came, how long it's been around, why it came, when it took a turn, because it's taken some major turns. It's not the same as it used to be. It's not a compassion-driven industry. It's a money-driven industry now. But it didn't start that way. Most doctors got involved out of love. So again, when you come back to it, I look at my simple brain took all of my crazy movements and dialed it into 8. My simple brain also says that the vast majority of doctors that I know learned on death. I learned on life. They learned on a cadaver. I learned on something that was literally moving and told me to stop touching it, or that it hurt right there, or that now that poke and that bust, the pulling of that toe made that eye move. Well, you can't really do that in a lab. You really can't, and I understand it. And ethically, guys, please don't start doing what I did. So I feel very blessed that it's almost like I was almost like the, like I forget in history who it was, but it's almost like the jester, the fool who was in the back room with the kings and the queens, who was learning everything because no one was taking him serious. Well, over the last 30 years, I'm the fall guy. I'm the guy that got things that people like, I don't know, go see that guy. Maybe it'll work. That's because they were thrown out of the other systems, or all the other systems failed them. So for me, no one was going to challenge me if I was taking certain things and putting it on your head and telling you to tap your nose while I was patting your back and having something sit on your foot. Well, that was great, because guess what? How can I fail? The system failed you. So the fact that the system failed so many is what made me brilliant. That's the truth. I did not have the constraints. Now, I'm not a doctor, but what is a doctor? A doctor, if you look up the definition of doctor, I just believe it's basically taking care of. It's healing, it's holding someone. So no, I don't hold a degree in doctor, but I sure hold a degree in healing almost anything through observation, love, and movement. And just so that people don't get it twisted, as I would say, movement. Medicine is actually trying to create some form of movement. That's what medicine is going into, typically the mouth. It could go into the arm. It's trying to get into your system, into your bloodstream. And when it does, it's disseminated in some way. If you can get it to allocate, which it typically can't, it's going to distribute somewhere, multiple places that you don't really want it to, more often than not, which is how we get side effects. But it's going somewhere in the body to say, blood, come here, nerves, you regenerate here, but they're asking for the system to integrate and to move. I figured out a way to do that with the intrinsic, innately wired system that's sitting there. So I prescribe movement that is medicine. The body's pharmacy will always surpass big pharma, always, and its efficacy. So what I've learned to do is speak to its efficacy through its system, and the ear can speak to the eye. So if you can't see, maybe I go to your ear to get to your eye. If you can't smell, maybe I go to your mouth to get to your nose. If you can't see, smell, or taste, I go to your throat to see if I can open them up. But the gateway is often sitting there. And I'm also passionately curious. And that has brought about a tremendous amount of healing for hundreds of people. And this system should be given. I want this to be given to the world, but I have to be exposed and put on some form of platform, to be there. And unfortunately, many of the things and people we see on platforms honestly aren't worthy. They're perpetuating the same traditional wheel of dysfunction. And there's a simple question to ask yourself: were you born doing that? Did your body come with that? If it didn't, most likely try to go somewhere before you go to the place you're thinking about.
Could you continue on that thread? I love that you brought up movement is medicine, movement as medicine. It was actually the next bullet that I had personally on my end of my notes that I wanted to bring up. So super cool to see you just naturally go there. Can you speak a little bit as well to the power of oxygenation, of this root circulatory system, that when you evaluate these 8 movement and these 8 movement positions for someone, you're able to see where maybe the right side is getting more circulation and blood flow than the left, or, it's a very gross, big picture example, but take it from there.
Yeah. Again, and to me, brilliance is being able to simplify and make it accessible. So I often, I go way out to I'll go in and I'll look at the curriculums or different journals to make sure that I'm in line with what's already been studied and documented and founded. But then I go back to this. Let's go to the old beginning of the gym classes, and or again, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but the child that does well is the child that gets the attention. The athlete that becomes the great athlete is often the athlete who sure may have been born with something great, a little bit differently, genetically predispositioned for them, maybe, but often the fact that someone gave them a little more attention, gave them a higher level of training and coaching, so that's energy. But without putting that energy into that particular human being or that resource, that energy would not manifest, or it would not excel. It would tend to start to decel, not thrive, and die. But it's really the accessibility to it and the access, which is what also keeps the rich getting richer, because of all the things they have access to. Well, the human body says, if I can't access that plane of movement, that movement is dying. If I can't access that functional plane of movement of one of these 8 movements that he has, that movement is dying. If I'm not accessing that left leg as much as I'm accessing that right, I'm falling over on one side, which means that's not just my foot, that's my brain, that's another hemisphere, that's another lobe. That could be a use a little different of another hip, which means later in life, that's a hip replacement. So I'm looking at, to me, simple things and saying, if you don't access it, it's dying. And oxygenation and circulation, they play together. If I can't wiggle the toes, it's dying. I mean, it's on some level, if it does not have its innate born range of motion and it's starting to go into flexion, it's starting to isolate. And where you start to isolate, you're now no longer integrating. And now you have a space filler in there that we call inflammation. And if there's inflammation is probably not doing great at circulation. And if it's not got circulation, it's probably got no neurological pulling on it. So it becomes a very simple machine, which we're not machines, but it's a very simple drawing. It's a very simple map. And so I just knew, okay, all I got to see, ma'am, is or General, whoever this is, I got to be able to see you access these 8 movements. And whatever one of these 8 movements that I know you need to walk, to talk, to eat, to sleep, to get up, those are the most primal things you need to do in your life to keep yourself alive. If you can't do it, my first question is, okay, there's a problem there. And often when something is dissected in one of these movements, so movement, if you can't access a movement, you can't feed that pattern. If you can't feed that pattern, there's no nutrients going to that pattern. There's no neurological stimulation going to that pattern. Now, modern medicine is going to call whatever that is stagnant over there some kind of a disease. So my simple brain says, how do I go recover that? How do I go recover that and get this dissection, this disease, to be intersected and get back in the flow with the rest of the community? That's when it heals. When you put people in prisons, often they don't heal. There's no healing in prison. Very rarely is there healing. You're isolating them. The body has the same complex but simple system built into it. You cannot isolate and not integrate, because at some point or another, it will become rogue, cellular. It'll become a cancer cell. It'll become a bad boy. It'll go to sleep. It'll just say, I'm neglected so much that I don't care what the rest of the body does. I have my own pattern, my own path. I have now created a pathology. So I say, hey, pathology, come back over here. I'm not letting you be a rogue in your movement pattern. You're going to come back in here and play with the rest of the team. That's another way of simply putting it. And that if you, as all human beings, before modern medicine, we had these beautiful senses to note how something was moving. And if it wasn't moving well, you rubbed it. You might have iced it. You might have put some salt on, some colloidal-based minerals on it. You might have elevated it for a while. But many of the things that people were doing, they've forgotten about those. Those are the things that heal the body. The body is built to heal. So movement, to me, I go from the outside in. I often say to people, I can do a surgery on your inside by working with your outside. The outside and inside, to me, are the same. Subcutaneous and visceral, they have a direct relationship. the anterior body, the posterior, it's the inside and the outside of the body. It's all one body. And the second you start to think of it as in separate bodies, now we're in trouble. Now you're diseasing. And I use the movement to get to people's minds and their bodies and to get them well. And then the other thing too, this is great, and I love this because it's true. But Dr. Mark Hyman and I, who again I highly respect him, we were in here doing a session, and hopefully he doesn't mind me saying it, but it's true, and I think he will be proud to hear me say this. But the thing about this was that we were talking about food as medicine, and I don't know where we left off, and I'll tell you my point. My point was that food without correct movement is not helpful. I've worked with a lot of naturopaths, a lot of vegan, macrobiotic, but yet sick. Why'd you get sick when you were eating so well? Well, you weren't moving well. So when I liken it to something like this, you get, you get this region of communication and these two places that need nutrients going to and from, and the nutrients that are so good over here, but that if there's a block or a dam of some sort in the middle of that communication and conversation, it's not allowing all those in the bloodstream, but only this side of the body, this half of the hemisphere is getting more of that due to a blockage or a usage, and this is getting much less of it. Then with that block, that side, no matter how many good foods you put in, if that nutrients is not making its way to that region's going to sleep. That region is deteriorating. So to me, I don't like to separate movement and food because I think those two are huge, and not to even get into the fact that the sun bypasses possibly both of them. But it's all one beautiful system that needs to be wound intricately together. But movement, to me, if I had to pick, I'm going with movement. Yeah. And then, of course, I do want to eat well, but movement is your medicine. It's a pretty interesting, Devin and PJ, when you're born, again, 7 children later, now 1 grandchild, they looked at my granddaughter's limbs. They looked at her feet. They checked her range of motion. They looked into her eyes. They wanted to make sure her ears worked. You open the mouth. Is it open wide enough? Can you see the tonsils? Can she breathe? Is she tracking? It's movement. They were looking at movement. They weren't looking at chemistry. They wanted to see if you come out here and you're moving well, then you are well. I think we go back to the APGAR test. Let's go back to the pediatricians. They're looking at movement. That's first and foremost. And every animal in nature they're not technically smelling you. I mean, some of them possibly ahead of time. And dogs, once they get upon you, they're going to check out your chemistry a little bit more with the smell. But before they smelled you, they saw you. And they saw you move. That told them, 1, do they approach you? Do they not approach you? Do they fight? Do they flight? Do they be? It was movement. In nature, it's movement. And nothing like a rhythm of movement, and the sun moves up and down. It's like beautiful. It's all about movement.
Yeah, really good metaphors. And I think like something about this is so, and to use the word again, primal, that like it speaks to people, that it's so intuitive in one way. And so much, I think, of the things that we see playing out in society is a lack of slowing down and being more intentional around things like this, and knowing that this isn't rocket science. We're not trying to put spacecraft on moon or catch a rocket with chopsticks as Elon Musk just did. It's something that we all have access to, and as you were pointing out with the children, like we've all seen that. We all understand that is the most foundational, or one of the most foundational things. Certainly, obviously there are other challenges with children, but their movement patterns are the primary thing that we look at so often, and how that expresses the deeper story of what's going on inside the child through this external interaction with the environment is such a clear picture in people's heads. Like I can see my nephew standing up for the first time and like picture exactly the style of movement of children learning to walk, or children going from crawling to walking, and like having that expression. And like, of course an adult should be able to do that, and if you're not able to do that, that's a regression or a dissection from these primal patterns. And it feels so intuitive, but it expresses in such unique and fractal ways, and it kind of goes out through whether or not it's just this pattern. And as you were pointing out with the jaw story and how getting somebody to unlock their hip which connects to the jaw enabled him, like it's so connected. Yeah, it's really fascinating, the body and everything else. I mean, everything seems to work like that, but the body is so incredible. So it's really cool how you've been able to learn that and are translating it into a way that people can connect with their own intuition and their own body in a way that gives them that function back, in a way that reunites them with these abilities that we had since we were 6 months old. Actually, this is a side note, but I have no idea when children learn how to walk. It could be, but 6 months sounded good. Hopefully someone can correct me. But yeah, point
Well,
being.
Devin, that, again, all this time in this, on this side of the planet Earth, and learning and loving and watching people, again, the amount of stories. But you just said something about your nephew and when they learn to walk and those kind of things. And we talked about the movement and how it was primal and it was there. And if we look at COVID, for instance, we see that the lack thereof integrated movement, what it has done to our children in society, which they've now all proven. And I have children that are in 4th grade, and on average, they're saying that we're about a year behind, and some say more, but developmentally. But that year or plus of isolation and not integration, not movement, was horrible. But it had so many bigger things on it that happen naturally, orthogonally, because they're socializing. You don't know what the kid is doing on the playground. You don't know what things they're seeing in school and what stimulations, and then what other kid brings a different lunch in, and what cross-pollination of theories. This comes from their home to the other one. So there's so much that's going on via movement. So bringing those kids home showed us that was not a great choice, at least for them. We isolated and didn't integrate. Maybe some of the elders it would have been great for. So there's that piece. But then at the same time, I thought about, so that's the outside, that's the macro movement system, which affected all their internal micro movement systems. Then we think of the fact that there was a woman at a local place just a couple years back, who the grandfather asked me, "You think you could help my daughter who's pregnant? She's 5.5 months pregnant, and they're thinking about taking the baby early because the baby's having what they see as some innate or some intrinsic heart issues." So I said, all I can tell you is that the baby and the mom are interconnected. This is the way I think. I said, I have to ask a couple questions. If she's functioning well, I believe the baby should be functioning well. But the baby is in essence her. She's forming the baby, so she's carrying neutral. Then the baby's got a full line of pathways and movements coming to and from. If she's sleeping well, eating well, and moving well. Is she hypertensive? What's going on? So I said, I want to know, does she have varicose veins on one leg and not the other? So that's my intuition when he said heart. And to me, I think of the calves as the second hearts in the body. I think of them as return systems. Not knowing anything sometimes makes me know a lot. And I've observed that over the years. So, and I just recently said that to one of the ER physicians that I'm working on and with. And he says, interesting concept. I said, but that is the return system. There's a top and there's a bottom. And as you age, often you shuffle. You don't have the same return system. So I think of those calves as like second hearts. So long story short, The grandfather said, let me ask my daughter. He asked his daughter, she said, oh my God, I only have varicose veins on my left side. I said, I can help her. She has a blockage. Well, if she has a blockage, then the baby has a blockage. So if I can free her blockage, I can most likely get the baby to unblock. Lo and behold, I worked with her for 3 weeks, 2 weeks. She went back out to Bay State and there was no reason. The baby's heart was functioning great again. There was a float. Did I take responsibility? I don't know. And I actually kind of don't care. And a big part of me believes that it was me and her, our intervention. But the outside macro movement for mom actually fed the internal movement for baby. We're so interconnected. And that's the same way we should be looking at each other. Like the second you leave one individual out, you've left yourself out, and it's coming back at some point. You know, that can get into philosophies, of course, and economy and politics. I don't believe in the whole separation deal, but anyway. Isolation, it's all disease. You separate and you don't integrate. You give somebody resources that you don't give somebody else. You give someone excess and not the other people access. Like you're creating a problem. And that's what the body's whole system is. It wants to be a system of wholeness, heldness, patterns, love, and movement, and integrated movement. And I'll find out where your body's not moving, and I'll get it to move. If it can move, we're gonna get it to move in a loving way and get it talking again, and then it's gonna heal itself up.
I love that. I'm just really thankful that you're our #1 podcast. You know, this is episode 1.
Yes.
Really a fantastic conversation, and I think. Well, there's a bunch more I want to ask, but I think we can have a second episode for sure.
Absolutely. We'll grow together.
Definitely. So I guess I would just ask, is there anything that you wanted to share that's kind of top of mind before we roll on to the next?
The thing I would like to share / leave people with is that it's that your health is everything. Health, with wealth, forget wealth, chasing the American dream, but yet the inability to walk, to talk, to pick up your child, to stand as long as you want, to breathe well, to sleep well, to eat well. Let's come back to what matters. I think that a lot of our quote unquote worldly, political, social, economical, racist, religion, so much of it comes from being freaking unhealthy. I mean, I think if we were to turn it's a new approach, if we were to paradigm shift it and figure out how to get everybody healthy, which means feeding them well, of course, right? Moving them well. I think that we would see less violence. I think we'd see less segregation and isolation. I think we'd see completely a ton less depression and anxiety and fear, battering and abuse, all that stuff, because an unhealthy human being does unhealthy things. So I believe the Alston Method, and is this a plug for me? No, this is a plug for us, because this isn't even my moves. This is just moves that I've taken and put together in a very systematic, easily accessible way. So they're really our moves. But I think that if someone was to do the Alston Method and take it seriously for 30 days and do the 8 movements every day for 20 minutes and do the 10 Try Tos that we have listed on our website, and if not, we'll put them up, but I believe they are, hopefully. And I'm actually going to quickly say them just in case, so that this is recorded. I believe that it would change the world. And I say that because something small is what made everything big. This is dialed down into what we all need as human beings. We need these 8 foundational movements, which will allow us to move well, think well, and love well, and not fight. The other thing we need is the 10 Try Tos. I'm just going to look over to my wall. Try to breathe regularly and continually. Try to breathe in your nose regularly and continually. Make that a first and foremost every day, all day. Try to stand as tall as you are, which is just walk into things with your true self. Be upright. Don't slouch. Don't go into flexion. Be who you are, so we can make that become physical or emotional or spiritual. All these things are very intertwined in those simple words. Try to unload your body by spending time on your back each day. That means take a break. That means reset your system every day before you go home and let loose on your friend, before you have road rage. Take some time, get on your back at the work site, at your construction, from your clerical job. Get over there, get off of that chair and get on your back, spend 3 minutes on your back, breathe in your nose, out your mouth, get up. You'll love your employee and possibly your partner next to you who's sharing the cubicle. 5, stay hydrated daily and year round. Movement comes through circulation. Circulation happens by at least 80% of our body being fluid. So how can't you be stuck if you're dry, right? Fluid. So stay hydrated, not because you're going out to run, but because we should be drinking and hydrating regularly. Eat a high volume of unprocessed foods. Just try. We know you are what you eat. Thanks, Dr. Mark Hyman. Absolutely, we are what we eat. So if you put in chemical and you get chemical reaction, that's your external system that will eventually react on the next human being during that reaction, right? It'll pull you away from what you maybe should be doing because now your body's responding weirdly. So let's get rid of the processed foods. Dedicate time each day to being outdoors in nature. That could have, and by the way, none of these are any more important than the other because each 10 are like my commandments, our commandments per se. But outdoor nature is where you observe, nature is where you get refueled. That's where all the true energy and observations are. Nature has it right. So if you pay attention, you get out there, you get healthy, you get well, you get bioavailable oxygen, you get stimulation, you get recharged, your mitochondria gets healthy, all that good stuff. You get great sun exposure. Try to move your body like you did as a youngster. The fact that we don't value our aging population is because I personally want to be one of the first. And if someone takes the idea from this podcast, brilliant, it's okay. I want to create the first senior playground. And I'd like to do it in the Berkshires. And I'd like to do it, and you can't even get into it until you're 62 and up. Because I would like to create a playground where they know that we are children. And when you stop thinking of yourself as a child, now you're aging, right? So move your body like you did as a youngster. Try to encourage your hands to find natural patterns that reflect their real use and function. If you just think about what you really do with your hands today is not what we did with our hands yesterday. Yesterday, we didn't have iPhones, iPads, scrolling apparatuses, touches of the board, tick-tocking. And to me, those things can bring about disformations and tics and anxiety and attention deficits. And the body's responding to what all these movements are. It doesn't know it. So take some time each day to encourage your hands to find natural patterns. That could be rubbing your hands together, rubbing your face, shaking hands with another person, hugging another person, crawling on the ground, picking things up off the ground, but becoming back to what we really already have intrinsically or innately sitting there. And last but not least, walk more cumulative time than you drive or sit. I believe those 10 things, along with these 8 foundational primal movements, could heal the world. And as simple as that sounds, if everyone's to do that, you'd have a lot of harmony, a lot of love, a lot less disease, a lot less poverty, a lot less fights. It would just be very different. So that's what I would love to leave it on, is this method is the people's method. And hope someone hears this and realizes what we have to offer the world, but it's time to get it out there.
Beautiful.
Powerful.
Thank you for sharing those 10 Try Tos.
Absolutely.
Love the foundational nature of what you've just shared with us. So,
and when you get advanced, we'll go into our 8 operating principles, but that's another time. We cover mind, body, and spirit, but we'll let that be on our second podcast.
Yeah, lots of opportunity going forward. Thanks for being our first guest on the Principles of Impact.
Guys, I really appreciate it.
And if people want to learn more, and of course I know some of this information working with you, but if they want to learn more, if they want to perhaps maybe try 30 days of the 8 movement Alston method, where do they go? Where can they find you?
You can find me in Great Barrington at the Alston Center. You can also call me directly if you like. I'm very accessible. I thought about that. Am I going to be inaccessible? So my number's everywhere. You want me, call me. 413-429-6419, 413-429-6419, www.alstonCenter.com. alstonCenter.com, ALSTONCENTER.com. And if you want to, because we also believe in giving, if you go onto YouTube and look up Alston Method, Joseph Antoine Alston, Alston Method, it's on there. It's a way. Now, is that everything? It gives you a lot of me, and it gives you these 8 movements, and you get to play with them. But they're on there for free, and you can find that right on YouTube.
Great. Thank you for sharing
Awesome.
that.
Very welcome.
Thank you so much for your time. And until the next one.
All right, guys. Thank you. This is a great first episode, and keep up the great work impacting out there. And absolutely,
Thanks.
thank you.
From the bottom of his heart, he really wants to help somebody get well. And he's willing to do whatever it takes to do that. And when you have that intuition, as well as that compassion and caring, you can't go wrong. He really has this way of focusing in on somebody's deficits. And it could be something that happened to them in the past that wasn't even physical. But just, there's things that hold people back. And it's not just a metabolic thing or not just necessarily a physical thing. But many times it could be some sort of traumatic event or a PTSD thing or something that's happened in their past. And he just has this way of trying to get to all those things. And part of that's from the fact that he cares. Part of that is from the fact that he really gives you the time to really get to try to understand you so he can help you get well. I think if we had more Antoines in this world, we'd be in a lot better place.